1. Passage etiquette.
Question. In the ritual of receiving alms, when reciting the offering song, why must the left hand curl 2 fingers and 3 fingers stand up, then place a bowl of rice on top of it? The right hand holds the seal, then raises it to the forehead. Ask, what does this mean?
Answer. The rite of passing away is one of many Buddhist rites. Each religion has its own special rituals and practices. The same goes for Buddhism. This is a ritual that is only found in pagodas of the northern sect, Mahayana. Theravada Buddhism, Hinayana, does not practice rituals like this. Because northern Buddhism is deeply influenced by Chinese Buddhism. Chinese Buddhism places great emphasis on formal rituals. This is also a unique cultural nuance of theirs. However, according to Buddhism, ritual forms are only a means and not an end. Buddhism advocates, things and reasons must be brought into harmony. Relying on facts to show reason or relying on reason to show things. Therefore, every ritual in Zen Buddhism has its own specific meaning. The image of 3 fingers, thumb, index and little finger, standing up and holding a very stable posture, like the image of 3 mountains standing tall, is a symbol of the 3 anaskaras. The 3 anaskaras are 3 very important subjects in Buddhism. What are those 3 subjects? That is, the study of precepts, the study of concentration and the study of wisdom. It can be said that the entire system of Buddhist teachings is built on these 3 subjects. They capture everything and interact with each other very closely. If one of the 3 is missing, then Buddhist teachings will immediately collapse. Like 3 fingers raised up. If 1 finger is missing, we cannot hold the bowl of rice steady. That's why the sutra says, the human world gives birth to concentration and only the human world develops you. A practitioner who wants to quickly attain Buddhahood cannot neglect these 3 subjects. However, among these 3 subjects, wisdom plays a more important role. No matter which discipline a practitioner practices, if he lacks the wisdom of investigation and guidance, he cannot achieve good results. As for the right hand, it is the nectar mudra. Orange is sweet. Lo is dew. Nectar is sweet and fresh dew drops. Nectar is a symbol of compassion. In Buddhism, wisdom and compassion always go together. They complement each other and cannot be separated. If there is only wisdom without compassion, then it is dry wisdom and does not benefit sentient beings. On the contrary, having only compassion without accompanying wisdom is blind compassion. For example, a person who is passionate about gambling loses all their money and asks you for money so they can continue playing. At that time, if you give them money out of love, it is like helping them sink deeper into the path of sinful addiction. So, you have compassion but lack the wisdom to observe thoroughly. Buddhists call that blind compassion. Therefore, Buddha taught Buddhists to always fully equip themselves with both compassion and wisdom. Wisdom is the guide to guide our compassion to the right place. Only then will it be beneficial for ourselves and for all sentient beings. Therefore, the 2 hands making the mudra must be placed equally, neither high nor low, which is representative of the fact that compassion and wisdom must always go hand in hand. Why do you have to raise it to your forehead? Actually, it is raised to the level of the eyebrows, called cushion of eyebrows. Raised eyebrows represent respect. Because in the past, according to Chinese customs, every time a subordinate offered food or objects to a superior, they had to raise it to their eyebrows to show great respect. In Kyo there is a sentence, the back porch is hung with a moon. Sin hurriedly raised his hand to his eyebrows. These 2 sentences describe the time when Kyo went to Kim Trong's inn and Kim Trong went to the back porch to take the lute and held it with both hands respectfully raised to his eyebrows to offer the lute to Kyo. That's a sign of respect for Kyo. That's because Kim Trong wanted to follow the old story, Man Kwong was a good wife. Whenever she offered rice to her husband, Luong Hong, she often raised the tray as high as her eyebrows. In the story of Quan Amt Kin there is also a sentence, that sentence is raised at eyebrow level, clean in one section, thus, raising your eyebrows is to show respect and offer rice to make offerings to the 3 jewels. 2. In what body did the Buddha go to Tao Loi heaven to preach the Dharma?
Question: Buddha has three bodies: Dharma body, response body, Sambhogakaya. The Ksitigarbha Sutra says, Buddha ascended to Tao Loi heaven to preach the Dharma to the Holy Mother. So I would like to ask, when Buddha went to heaven to preach the Dharma, which body did he use?
Answer: Let me tell you right away that the Buddha walks with the response body. The reason why? Because Buddha has 6 powers. Among the 6 passages, there is a passage called the Suc Thong. This message has the ability to manifest at will, freely and without hindrance. This is not surprising to us when reading old story books, especially Chinese stories. Like Fong Then story, for example. In it, they are described as having miracles of flying in the clouds, or appearing invisible, etc. Or as celestial beings flying back and forth freely. These are people who have not yet practiced and attained enlightenment, but are still transformed like that. On the contrary, Buddha is a great enlightened one. He has enough magical powers and unpredictable transformations, so is he not as good as those fairies? Therefore, the Buddha who manifests in all realms and places is an apparition or reincarnation, not a Sambhogakaya or Dharmakaya. 3. What does clasping hands mean?
Question: Why do Buddhists clasp their hands when chanting sutras or greeting each other? So what is the meaning of clasping hands?
Answer: Put your hands together, Anjali in Sanskrit. The meaning of clasping hands is to concentrate thoughts and respectfully worship. This is an ancient way of worship in India, practiced by Buddhism. Indians believe that the right hand is the divine hand, the left hand is the impure hand. But if 2 hands join together as one, it becomes the unity between the holy and impure aspects, so, closing hands, is the most authentic expression of the human face. The meaning of immaculate, impure, in the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra is this idea. In addition to expressing the intention of reverence in the heart, clasping hands also symbolizes the intention of returning to the origin. Reaching a place of non-power, non-truth, and reasonable agreement, according to the great Tang Westvut Kai-tu, clasping hands is the 4th of the 9 ways to worship in India. Esoteric Buddhism combines both hands with the Vajra precept and the Tigarbha precept, or reason and wisdom, or concentration and wisdom, etc., and at the same time coordinates the 10 fingers with the 5 elements, the 10 paramithas, etc. In addition, Mahavairakana Sutra 13 states 12 ways to clasp hands. 1. Be patient with your palm, 2 hands clasped tightly together, fingertips equal. 2. Empty heart together palm, also called empty heart half palm, 2 hands clasped, fingertips equal, slightly hollow in the middle. 3. The union palm position, fingers clasped together, palm bulging out in the shape of a lotus bud. 4. Sisters of the union palm, fold hands with 2 thumbs and 2 little fingers together, the other fingers are open, like a smiling lotus flower. 5. Showing the palm of the hand, both hands touching the head, facing up. 6. Try Tui Heap palm, both hands are also facing up as before, the posture is cupped as if scooping water. 7. Kui La Heap palm, also called Kim Tsang Heap palm, place the finger of the right hand on top of the finger of the left hand. 8. Reflection of the palm of the hand, 2 hands clasped upside down, placing the right hand on the left hand. 9. Reflection and reciprocity before the palm of the hand, the backs of both hands are placed together, the right hand is placed face up on the back of the left hand. 10. Hon Ko Chi Hyu palm, both hands lie on their backs, the tips of the 2 index fingers touch each other. 11. Fook tries in the direction of the lower half of the palm, both hands lie face down, the tips of the 2 index fingers touch each other. 12. Fook Thursday Heap Thuong, 2 hands facing down, thumbs touching. These 12 types of clasping hands all have different profound meanings. 4. What is the correct way to serve food for the dead?
Question: I often see that when making offerings, there are 3 bowls of rice placed equally. The middle bowl of rice has a pair of chopsticks, and the two sides of the rice bowl have only two chopsticks. Please, what does this mean?
Answer: this rice offering ritual was created by our ancestors. This is a custom that has existed since ancient times. When worshipping, put 3 cups of rice, 1 cup in the middle must be full of rice and 2 cups on both sides must be filled with rice. The bowl of rice and the pair of chopsticks in the middle are to worship the newly deceased spirit, while the 2 bowls and 2 chopsticks on both sides are to worship the 2 shoulders, that is, the left side of the divine light and the right side of the divine light. Usually it is wrong to offer 3 cups, 6 cups or 9 cups, not 5 cups. The reason for leaving 2 chopsticks on both sides is that old ghosts often bully new ghosts, so only leave 1 pair and not the whole pair. If left intact, the newly dead spirit will hardly be able to eat it completely, but will be eaten by the ghosts. It should be clearly stated that this method of offering rice is not a Buddhist ritual, but rather follows ancient folk beliefs. 5. Why is it that when worshipping the dead, chant the mantra to turn food into water?
Question: why do we read 2 mantras when making offerings or presenting spirits to the masters, turn tuk and turn water? Please, what does this mean?
Answer: transformation of true mantra or transformation of mantra, or transformation of Dala Ni. This is the mantra of transforming food to offer to gods and hungry ghosts. Regarding the cause of this mantra, according to the Hugh Kwong Buddhist Dictionary, Volume 1, page 752, it is written as follows: the Sutra of the Buddha's word, hungry ghosts Dala Ni said, Buddha preached the Dharma in the Sangha Lam Ni with this rule. Into Kapila. At that time, Venerable Ananda sat alone in a quiet place practicing meditation. After the 3rd watch, the Venerable Ananda himself saw a hungry ghost DM cow, an ugly and thin body, a burning fire in his mouth, a throat as small as a pinhead, tangled hair, and long, sharp teeth and claws that were very terrifying. That hungry ghost told Ananda, after 3 days, Ananda will die and also fall into the realm of hungry ghosts. Ananda was scared and immediately asked what to do to escape suffering. The hungry ghost DM Ko then clearly pointed out to Ananda, if you offer food to countless hungry ghosts and hundreds of thousands of Brahmin immortals, a type of fairy among demons, and make offerings to the 3 jewels, then dedicate the merit to them, so that they will be born in heaven, and that person's lifespan will be increased. The Venerable Ananda immediately went to the Buddha, brought this matter up and asked the Buddha for guidance. The Buddha proclaimed the true mantra of Dalani to the hungry ghost DM Ko, possessing immeasurable majesty, virtue, and supernatural power. According to Tu Tik Kim Tsang Kwa Gi Hoi Essentials Commentary 2, the practitioner recites this mantra 3 times, 7 times or 21 times, then thanks to the divine power of the mantra, the offerings naturally turn into delicious dishes for the monks. Heaven, every dish is as abundant as Mount Meru. To practice this transformation of food, first use the pure Dharma realm mantra Lam and perform the auspicious Mudra to bless the food 21 times to make the food pure, then recite the mantra of transformation of food, then recite universal offering. Proverbs, Di 92, 137 lower, a sentence, a non-ganang, a tam ba fa, a Buddha's birthday will bring forth Hong. In addition, according to the Own Son Venerable Tan Kui Ha of Japan, there is an additional mantra of sprinkling water and reciting in the festival of offering alms to hungry ghosts, Di 82, 446 Trung, is, Namo Tat Fat the Nada, Fa Fo just the soul, Judge, Tam Bat Rat Bon. 6. Why do we still visit the house when we bring the spirit?
Question: those who practice purifying karma according to the Buddha's name method, the goal is to seek rebirth in ultimate bliss. To do so, cultivators, in addition to reciting Buddha's name, also need to have the mind to let go of attachment to worldly conditions. However, for some reason, when people who practice pure karma pass away, I often see their souls cremated or buried, and often stop by the house to visit their family for the last time. I would like to ask, is this contrary to the original vow of renunciation to pray for birth in the Pure Land?
Answer: this issue, please explain through 2 aspects. in terms of life, that is, the worldly truth, this has nothing against common sense. To be more specific, it is very consistent with the traditional cultural practices of Vietnamese people. According to the concept of our ancestors, people live with a house, waterfalls have a grave. Therefore, housing for Vietnamese people is very important. Whatever you do, the first thing is to have a house first. That's why there is a saying, settle down in peace. While in Vietnam, most sick people died at home. Even if they die at the hospital, the deceased's relatives must take their loved one home and bury them at home to take care of the funeral arrangements. But on the contrary, in Australia it is different. Most people die in the hospital, and then their bodies are taken to the funeral home, therefore, bodies are rarely buried at home, for many inconvenient reasons. Therefore, when taking the coffin to be cremated or buried, the deceased's relatives, or with the will of the deceased, should let the coffin visit the house to let the incense visit the house one last time. However, if this is said from the perspective of moral liberation, especially for those who practice pure karma, whose original vow is that after giving up this retribution body, they wish to be born in the pure land, then this is not true. Some reasonable. The reason why? Because there are many reasons. To illustrate a few things, first, contrary to the original vow at birth. Because the original vow of a person who specializes in purifying karma with a fervent wish is that after leaving this retribution body, he vows to be reborn in the pure land. That is a fervent wish, the only one of those who specialize in purifying karma. If you have such a passionate wish, then when it comes to housing and material wealth, everything is just vanity and vanity, nothing important to regret visiting. Furthermore, when visiting, you cannot bring anything with you, it will only damage the conditions for your wish to be reborn in the pure land. Second, it causes the soul to lose mindfulness and give rise to attachment. The sutras teach, reciting anything at all, does not give birth to the pure land. Love is not tainted, it does not give birth to saha. Mindfulness or quiet mindfulness is really important for people who have just passed away. When we bring them back home to revisit the memories that they often love every day, surely they won't have nostalgic thoughts. Furthermore, according to the sutra, people who are not extremely good or extremely evil must fall into the intermediate state, of course their consciousness is very weak. Not only do we not support the conditions to protect their awakening, but we also cause them such a predestined love and greed, how can they escape? We should remember, Buddha taught, the mind of craving is the focal point of birth and death, it is the motive that motivates the consciousness to create karma to experience suffering. Therefore, if your relatives truly love your blood relatives, you should listen to Buddha's teachings and reconsider. If you are a relative, you should be even more careful in instructing your children and grandchildren to do this. Because it only causes more harm, not any benefit, I hope you will calm down and consider carefully. No one can see the benefits more clearly than the Buddhas and patriarchs. The Buddha taught like that, so we should not do the opposite, but must feel the suffering. At that time, no matter how much we cried, Buddha could not save us. It is best to avoid the causes of suffering, then you will never reap the consequences of suffering. I hope so. Third, it is contrary to protecting thoughts. Protecting thoughts, that is, helping people who are about to die to maintain mindfulness or pure mindfulness, is extremely important. In the family, if there is a sick person who is about to die, all relatives and friends who come to visit should wholeheartedly recite Buddha's name for the sick person. In this case in Australia, direct chanting is somewhat difficult. Because most patients with serious illness have to be hospitalized for treatment. Therefore, the support of relatives or friends is somewhat difficult. However, we should be skillful in taking advantage of the means, by turning on the machine to recite Buddha's name so that the patient can hear it. It is very beneficial for the patient to listen continuously like that, because it is easy to concentrate and recite the Buddha's name, it is a very good means of protection. That is to say, when the patient is still somewhat conscious. If after death, in the first days before cremation or burial, protection is still very necessary to help the soul. Or recite Buddha's name, or chant sutras, or use words to remind the soul of the soul to be aware. Try to restrain yourself from being sad or crying, which will harm the soul. Thanks to that, the soul can somewhat return to consciousness and change its mind. With the habit of cultivating and reciting every day while still alive, the soul will soon be liberated. On the contrary, on the other hand, not only do we not really care for such thoughts, but we also create in our souls a love and attachment to home and wealth, which is truly an extremely harmful thing. In short, bringing the incense spirit to visit the house one last time through the question of the questioner is only limited to the scope of the person cultivating pure karma, so we will only answer with a little sincerity within that scope. I hope that all of you who are practicing to purify your karma, please re-examine carefully so that your quest for rebirth will not be hindered. For this, we need to choose and decide one of the two. If we follow the fate of life, it will be very difficult for us to be reborn. If you follow your own wishes, then of course it's against life. We are practitioners, and our whole life has only one thing to do, which is to recite Buddha's name and pray to be reborn in the Pure Land. To escape the life of suffering and rebirth in the sea of love, it is better to accept being contrary to life than to be contrary to our original vows. There is an even more practical benefit, not wasting the time of friends saying goodbye. And so, the spiritual fragrance increases even more blessings. Because if they have to waste time because of me, then I will lose my blessings. That is a practical benefit. Above are just the sincere suggestions of the answerer, based on the Buddha's teachings, but the decision to choose is up to each person. 7. The problem of ego, how real and fake is it?
Question. In Buddhism, sometimes it is said that the self is not real, and sometimes it is said that the self is true. Many times we even exalt the ego, considering it to be the only one. Just like when the Buddha was first born, he said, "In heaven and under, I am the only one." Why is sameness equal to self, when speaking the truth, when speaking untruth? So is there any contradiction or contradiction?
Answer. There is nothing contradictory. The word ego is the pronunciation of Chinese characters, meaning I, me, or myself, etc. To help you better understand the word ego, I would like to quote a passage about the definition of the word ego, in the Hugh Kwong Buddhist Dictionary. Episode 5. Ego means breathing, transformed into life, self, body, self, essence, self-nature, or generally refers to the eternal independent subject, hidden in the origin of all things. The whole thing, and governs the unified individual. This is one of the most important topics in the world of Indian thought. It is said that the self must meet three elements: master, permanent and free. The self that Buddhism denies, or advocates non-self, is to clearly point out the self that is combined by cause and effect. Due to the combination of causes and conditions, of course it has no master, is not permanent and is not free. Like the body we are carrying, Buddhists call it a temporary body, because it is composed of the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates are form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Chromatic matter belongs to the 4 elements, that is, it is composed of 4 elements gathered together to form. Like earth, water, wind, fire. These 4 combine in compulsive needs. Therefore, they often oppose each other, and that is why we are often sick, that is the material combination. As for the spirit of understanding, it is also due to the combination of 4 things: feelings, thoughts, actions, and consciousness. Feeling is the feeling of happiness or sadness, or neither happiness nor sadness. Thinking is remembering past events or imagining things to come. Actions are the moment-by-moment changes of the stream of consciousness. Consciousness is the distinction between right and wrong, good and bad, etc. These 4 things constitute the psychological state. Thus, each of our bodies is composed of 2 parts, matter and spirit. Having said that, structure, of course, must be made up of many things coming together. If there is union, there must be dissolution. That is an immutable theorem of dependent origination. Therefore, Buddhists call this body non-self, because many of the elements that make up it are temporary and not real. On the contrary, the self that Buddhists call the true self is the true I. Talking about the self is pointing to the subject of life. But there are two types of life, temporary and eternal. A temporary life is a life that is still dependent on the category of cause and effect. As for eternal life, it is beyond the scope of cause and effect. This life, in Buddhism, has many different names, such as the true self, Dharmakaya, Buddha nature, nirvana, original face, absolute truth, etc. It is an immortal entity. The saying goes, in heaven and under, the ego is the only one. The word self here refers to the true self, not the ordinary self, combined by causes and conditions. We should not misunderstand that Buddha is arrogant, conceited, and exalts his ego above all else. This word self is one of the four virtues of nirvana, which in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, the Buddha stated, true permanence, true bliss, true self, true pureness. In the Diamond Prajna Sutra there is a verse, due to the weakness of seeing oneself. The sound of the bridge falls, Nan practices evil ways, unable to see Tathagata, roughly translated, if anyone uses form to see me, use your voice to pray to me, that person practices evil religion. Tathagata cannot be seen. If you want to see the Tathagata, how should you see it? It is impossible to see with the physical eye, through the image of the Buddha's form, because the form is due to the combination of conditions, so there is no self. Nor can you use the ears to hear the Buddha's sound, and think that you see the Buddha. Because the sound is also due to the combination of conditions. Thus, anyone who runs after appearances or sounds to find the Buddha will be scolded by the Buddha for practicing evil religion and will never see the Buddha. So, if we want to see Buddha, we cannot see it with our physical eyes, but must see it with our mind, that is, secretly recognize the eternally pure, clear, unborn and immortal entity in each of us, that is, see Buddha or Tathagata. Tathagata here, we must understand as the Buddha's Dharma body, not the Buddha's retribution body. The Buddha Dharmakaya is another name for the true self or the great self. Anyone who directly perceives this wise nature is called enlightened or enlightened. In short, when we say that the self is not real, of course we must understand that it is the self that is created by causes and conditions. Temporarily called false self, pretending to have an empty self, temporarily living for a period of time. As for the true self, we know that it is the self, beyond the conditions of birth and death. That self has no shape or form, temporarily called the true self or the absolute truth, etc. 8. Meaning of Buddha walking 7 steps.
Question: when Buddha was born, he walked 7 steps and then stopped without taking 8 steps or 6 steps, and then on each step there was a lotus flower. So I would like to ask, what does the 7 steps symbolize?
Answer: this issue has many different explanations. Up to now, people have not agreed on which theory is correct. Because each theory has different arguments. There is a theory that, according to Buddhist concepts in particular, and ancient Indian concepts in general, all believe that, the formation of a world is due to the structure of many microscopic particles combined. Again, if we speak according to today's science, it is due to the combination of many atoms or molecules. Small particles combine to form large particles. Just like that, they gradually combine to form a world. However, in what way are these particles combined? According to Buddhism, in the middle there is a main nucleus. Then around it there are 6 additional particles. In general, according to the technical terminology of Buddhism, it is called the 7-dimensional ceiling. That is, 7 very small, mysterious dust particles, almost like nothingness, combined, if split, become nothingness. From the 7 broken scales and dust, they combine to form a bare-headed ox hair, buffalo's hairy head. From the 7 bare-headed ox furs combined, it becomes a bowl of bare-headed fur, rabbit's fur head, etc. Thus, the number 7 is created by many dust particles. To be clear, no dust particle exists on its own. Of course, it must rely on many other tiny dust particles to form. Therefore, the image of Buddha when he was first born. He walked 7 steps is to represent him walking everywhere in the world. At the same time, it also represents his Dharma voice, which resonates throughout the 3,000 great thousand worlds. The lotus flower represents purity. Meaning, even though the Buddha was born in this impure world, he was never contaminated by the world. That's because his aspiration was born to save sentient beings. 9. Meaning of Rosary.
Question: As a Buddhist who practices the Buddha's name method, I often recite the rosary to recite the Buddha's name. However, to be honest, I don't quite understand what it means. Why must 108 beads be strung, not 107 or 109? So, what does 108 mean? And why do we need to pray a rosary when reciting Buddha's name? Does it have any use in eliminating afflictions?
Answer: Rosary is one means among thousands of other means. In Buddhism there are countless means. All forms of Dharma objects or objects are means. However, it is not without reason that people present it. Of course, each form of an object has its own special symbolic meaning, for example, a snare, a bell, a drum, etc. The important thing to point out is, relying on means to achieve the goal, such as using a net to catch fish, using a slingshot to shoot birds. If we speak in Zen language, see form and clarify mind. In other words, rely on facts to reveal reason, reason must be fulfilled. That is the main goal that Buddhism aims at, and that is also the wise attitude of people who study Buddhism. The first question is, why do people string 108 beads and not 107 or 109? Please answer. The reason there is the number 108 is because people add the 6 senses, 6 objects and 6 consciousnesses together, creating the 18 precepts, 18, and then multiply them by the 6 basic afflictions, greed, anger, ignorance, pride, doubt, evil views, resulting in the number 108. 18 times 6 is equal to 108. However, here, we would also like to explain a little more about this symbolic number 108. As we all know, in the Buddhist scriptures, it is taught that the reason sentient beings continue to drift in the cycle of birth and death is rooted in ignorance. The origin of ignorance is from the roots. Senses and consciousness. Often referred to as the 18 precepts. If we look closely at these 3 things, we see that the fault is in the senses and consciousness, but the objects, 6 objects, form, sound, smell, taste, touch, Dharma, have no fault at all, because they are just objects of perception of sense organs and consciousness only. When the senses, i.e. 6 senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, come into contact with objects, forms, sounds, scents, tastes, touches, Dharma, discrimination arises. When the consciousness differentiates, the 6 basic afflictions are added. To be more specific, the 6 basic afflictions mentioned above, they cooperate and work together with consciousness in a very close and effective way, so we can distinguish between good and bad, and then give birth to the mind of love and hate. The concept of love and hate arises from the roots of greed, anger, and ignorance. This is the clue to ignorance and afflictions, delusional thinking. From there, we create karma to experience suffering. If we speak more strictly and concisely, then as the Shurangama Sutra, Buddha stated, samsara or liberation, the root comes from the 6 senses. Thus, it shows us that these 3 things are extremely important, and that each practitioner needs to examine carefully to eliminate afflictions. If you want to eliminate afflictions, the practitioner needs to have the means, or a method of practice. For those who cultivate pure karma, the Buddhas all taught that it is necessary to recite Buddha's name. In the method of reciting Buddha's name, in order to reach one mind, the first step is to have the means to restrain the mind. That means, in addition to reciting the Buddha's name, it is also necessary to have a rosary, to follow each bead according to each Buddha's name as a standard, while reciting the Buddha's work continues like that. Coming to the second question, why when reciting Buddha's name, do you pray the rosary with your right hand? Please tell me, not everyone who recites the Buddha's name necessarily recites the rosary. This depends on each person's personality and habits. However, for those who have made a vow to recite the Buddha's name, according to the instructions of the patriarchs of the Lotus sect, they should recite the rosary to conveniently count the number according to their vows. Because for beginners like us, with many karmic hindrances, whose minds are not yet pure and full of chaotic delusions, it is better to use the rosary by hand, so that when reciting the Buddha's name, it is easier to restrain the mind. As said above. Furthermore, we often hear that for people who practice pure karma, their three karmas, body, speech, and mind, need to be kept pure. The hand praying the rosary belongs to the body's karma, the mouth reciting Buddha's name belongs to the verbal karma, the mind concentrates on the Buddha's chant without leaving, it belongs to the mental karma. Then it is also said in the sutra, the three karma are always pure, like Buddha in the West. Thus, holding the rosary with your hands is also the purpose of remembering that each bead is reciting a Buddha's name, and at the same time, it is also to remember the number without confusion. Coming to the third question. Does it have any use in eliminating afflictions? Please answer, of course there is. As mentioned above, its use is just a means like thousands of other means. People use it to recite Buddha's name. By reciting the rosary and recording the number of verses, the mind becomes less distracted. However, the basic point to eliminate afflictions is in the mind. A person recites the Buddha's name and holds a rosary while his mind wanders, thinks nonsense, runs east or west, then that is just reciting with his mouth for the sake of reciting, but cannot produce the result of concentration. The main purpose of reciting Buddha's name is to concentrate the mind. Because reciting Buddha's name means remembering Buddha. Buddha doesn't remember, but remembers other nonsense. Reciting like that is not the true meaning of reciting Buddha's name. Therefore, if you want to quickly get rid of afflictions, the practitioner must keep the mind and voice united, and must constantly be close to each other, and at the same time recite the Buddha's name clearly and clearly. In the book Lower Hands of Reciting Buddha, the Venerable Thich Tri Tin advised people to recite Buddha's name with a verse as follows. Namo Amitabha, neither urgent nor hasty, mind, voice, united together, always meditate clearly. Mindfulness is the study of concentration, realizing the true wisdom. Mindfulness eliminates confusion, the precepts are enough at the same time, the power of mindfulness is continuous, in the true sense of holding on to the name. Buddha's single mind is present, samadhi of accomplishment. Contemplation means no thought, mindfulness of nature is inherently empty, the mind that becomes. Buddha is Buddha, evidence, Dharma manifests, Namo Amitabha, trying their best, Thuong Pham Lotus Bridge. 10. The meaning of the wheel turning the wheel of Dharma.
Question. Looking at the wheel badge with 12 spokes, some people say that it is the wheel of reincarnation. They explain that the 12 spokes symbolize the 12 causes and conditions. Some people say that it is the wheel that turns the Dharma wheel. Please ask, through the above two things, I don't know which one is correct.
Answer. If you say anything is correct, then we would like to answer immediately. The person who said the wheel has 12 spokes, symbolizing the wheel of reincarnation, is correct. The reason why? Because the teaching of 12 causes and conditions from ignorance to Lao Tzu is a chain, a vicious circle in which sentient beings are forever bound in the 3 realms and 6 paths. To escape, or cut off this chain of bondage, each person needs to eliminate ignorance, because it is the main culprit that causes suffering. Therefore, people use the image of a wheel with 12 spokes to express the meaning of reincarnation in which people are forever subjected to suffering. As for the wheel that turns the Dharma wheel, people make the wheel with 8 spokes to symbolize it. The number 8 symbolizes the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path includes right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Because of the 4 noble truths, suffering, origin, cessation, and path, the Noble Eightfold Path belongs to the truth of the path. The noble truth of the path consists of 37 parts or chapters, often called the 37 supporting chapters. The 37 teachings include the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 powerful minds, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 bodhisattva parts, and the Eightfold Path. Among these 37 teachings, the Noble Eightfold Path is the most important. Because those are the 8 paths that lead sentient beings to enlightenment and liberation. In other words, there are 8 methods to eliminate suffering, to achieve peaceful nirvana, truth of cessation. Therefore, to remind people to always remember these 8 important paths, people use a wheel with 8 spokes to symbolize the meaning of turning the wheel of Dharma.
Thank you for spending your valuable time on my channel journey to enlightenment. Wishing you a very peaceful and happy day. Don't forget to click like and subscribe to my support channel. See you in the next video.